to you, which I generally don't like starting by doing, but I figure I'll do it anyway, because today this is an appropriate beginning to what we're talking about. This is from former Chief Rabbi of England, Jonathan Sachs, and he writes his commentary on Parshat Korach, where he says, he discusses the whole idea of conflict and argument and disputes, and it relates to the Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Parak Mishnah 20, where the line is, and I'll read it in Hebrew, and then I'll translate it into English. The line is, Kol machloket shehi l'shem shamayim, sofa lehitkayem, v'she'ena l'shem shamayim, ein sofa lehitkayem, which translates as, any dispute which is made for the sake of heaven will ultimately endure, and one which is not for the sake of heaven will not ultimately endure. And that's not my translation. Translation comes from Torah.org. The idea of ultimately endure, I'm not really sure if that's the right translation, but we'll leave it at that. And the Mishnah then continues, Ezehi machloket shehi l'shem shamayim. What is a dispute which is for the sake of heaven? And instead of giving a concrete example of a specific dispute, it says, Zu machloket Hillel Shammai. That refers to a dispute between Hillel and Shammai. The she'ena l'shem shamayim, and a dispute that is not for the sake of heaven, Zu machloket Korach v'chol adato. This is the dispute of Korach and his entire assembly. And in my mailing, I raised the question, the idea that if you take a look at the Mishnah is kind of, the Mishnah is very precise when it chooses its words, and there's a very strange non-parallel in the Mishnah. Because the Mishnah, if it was going to write parallel text, what it would have said is a machloket l'shem shamayim, a dispute for the sake of heaven. Okay, l'shem shamayim, a dispute for the sake of heaven, would be Hillel and Shammai. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's the argument l'shem shamayim. What does it mean? On the surface, basically, what it means is Hillel and Shammai. What are they arguing about? They're arguing about Jewish law. They're arguing about halakha. They're arguing about trying to find out what one should do. So that's l'shem shamayim. On the surface, that's what it is. What is a machloket that's not for the sake of heaven? The Mishnah should have said Korach and Moshe. Instead, the Mishnah says the machloket, the dispute that's not for the sake of heaven, is Korach and his assembly, which is not the same parallel. It's not two antagonists. It's two people on one side, but there's no antagonist. So my understanding of the Mishnah, because the Mishnah likes to choose its words very carefully, is that the Mishnah is sending us a subliminal message here. And what's the subliminal message? Who was arguing in this assembly of Korach when Korach confronted Moshe? Who were the antagonists? Korach. Well, no, the antagonists were Korach and his assembly.
Right, yeah.
No, but what I'm saying is, it's not that Korach banded together with his assembly to fight against Moshe. Korach banded against his assembly.
But his assembly didn't want?
Korach and his assembly, when it refers to Korach and his assembly, what essentially the Mishnah is saying is, there was no unity.
You were just one against another.
It was a bunch of people who in effect were enemies. They didn't like each other. They were antagonists. What's the phrase? The enemy of my enemy
Is my friend.
is my friend, or the enemy of my enemy is my enemy, or whatever it is. The only person who represented a side that was not specifically selfish was Moshe. The people who gathered together, the people who gathered together with Korach were not supporting Korach. The people who gathered together with Korach were all interested in their own advancement.
They were anti-Moshe?
They were, the only thing they had in common is they were anti-Moshe, but they didn't like each other. Think about it. Who was in the assembly of Korach? Now would be a good time to open up the Tanakh. Take a look at Parashat Korach. Okay, may I borrow this? Take a look at Parashat Korach. Okay? In Parashat Korach, and again, we're going to deal with this much later, but I wanted to bring this here.
It's on page 319.
Thank you.
Very good.
And I was going to do chapter verse. I'm impressed.
313.
Okay? In 319, Vayikach Korach,
300.
Vayikach Korach, at the very bottom of the page, Ben Yitzhar ben Kahat ben Levi. Okay? Korach, the son of Yitzhar, the son of Kahat, the son of Levi. And with him were Datan va'Aviram b'nei Eliav, va'on ben Peled b'nei Reuven. And Datan, Aviram, and On ben Peled were all from the tribe of Reuven. Okay? All right. What's the agenda of Korach? Power. Why does he want power? Because he says, take a look at my genealogy. Okay? Look at my genealogy. I am Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahat ben Levi. The right of rule should actually be descended not from Moshe ben Amram, okay, but from me through my family. Datan, Aviram, and On ben Peled. What are they arguing? We're from the tribe of Reuven. Reuven is the firstborn, to whom belongs the right of the heir to Yaakov, the firstborn. So therefore, we deserve to be the leaders, not Moshe. So in effect, Korach and the other three are operating at cross purposes internally. Each of them wants to be the leader. But what do they all agree on? That it shouldn't be Moshe. That it shouldn't be Moshe. So, what looks like, in the first case, at first blush, what looks like a bid for equality and a bid for democracy is really not a bid for democracy. It's a personal grudge. It's not, we want there to be a democratic leadership. It's, we don't want your leadership. We want, or I should say not we, I want my leadership. So I'm going to team up with somebody who's going to push you out. And then after he pushes you out, then I'll take over.
Doesn't that sound familiar?
Always, always. It's it's let's form a temporary coalition, okay? Kick out the guy who's in power, and then when the dust settles, I'll take power, and you can be my second in command. Whatever, until somebody else kicks me out. But this is the idea. This is the idea, and it's not a new idea. It's not a novel interpretation. But essentially, it goes back to practically all of the Meforshim. Once you started to have Meforshim on the Tanakh, but the idea, which is mentioned here, he says that. Where is it? Okay. Okay. All right. Sachs writes as follows, and I love this line. He says, Judaism has sometimes been called a culture of argument. Okay, I like that. It is the only religious literature known to me whose key texts, the Hebrew Bible, Midrash, Mishnah, Talmud, the codes of Jewish law, and compendia of biblical interpretation, are anthologies of arguments.
Oh, man.
I disagree.
But, yeah. But the next sentence is the best sentence. This is Jonathan Sachs. The next sentence is the best sentence. He says, that is the glory of Judaism. The divine presence is to be found not in this voice as against that, but in the totality of the conversation. Jewry has been debilitated time and again in its history by disagreement, dissension, fractiousness, and conflict. That is not its glory, but its disgrace. How can the very attribute that is the virtue of its text be the vice of its people? The answer lies in the teaching which we began. It depends on the nature of the argument. Is it or is it not for the sake of heaven? Is it a battle for truth or for victory? In the battle for truth, both sides win. In the struggle for victory, both sides lose. Whoops. This is a wonderful statement. It's an absolutely wonderful statement, and it's so true. And it's something that I wrote in my mailing. The idea is that a machloket l'shem shamayim, an argument, a dispute that's for the sake of heaven, is looking for what I call a transcendent truth. And when you're trying to find a transcendent truth, everybody's right. Okay? It doesn't matter if I agree with you or I don't, or I did, sorry. Doesn't matter if I agree with you. Boy, my money's falling. That's okay. I'll leave it. You know the old story about the fundraisers, rabbi, a Catholic priest, and a Protestant minister get together, and they start comparing notes on how they raise money for their shul, or church, or respective temple. And the Catholic priest says, well, I have a system. I take all the money that I collected from my parishioners, and I stand in the middle of the chapel, and I draw a circle around myself, and then I throw the money up in the air. Whoever lands outside the circle, I give to the church. Whatever lands inside the circle, I keep for myself. The minister says, well, I have a similar but slightly different approach. I draw a circle, and I throw the money up in the air. Whatever lands inside the circle, I give to the church. And whatever lands outside the circle, I give I take for myself. And the rabbi says, well, I have a similar approach, but slightly different. I don't draw a circle. I take the money I collected, I throw it up into the air. Whatever God wants, he keeps, and whatever he doesn't want, I pick up from the floor. So I'm tempted to say whatever fell on the floor from my mouth. Okay, either way, I think I'll pick it up, but not right now. Actually, maybe some American change in here. I think I'll just put it in, whatever.
If you need some published money, I'll put some.
It's not all that.
Do you have it with you? Can I see it?
No?
That's Ray Leo. That's Ray Leo. Let's just put that in here. Since it fell on the floor, obviously it's God's way of saying you got to give to the person. Anyhow, the idea here is that the Tanakh is filled with conflicts. Not every conflict is a machloket l'shem shamayim. Many of the conflicts are not l'shem shamayim. many of the conflicts that we're going to be looking at are disputes that teach us something because they are l'shem shamayim, and many of them are conflicts that we will analyze and say, this is not really l'shem shamayim. It's important to understand it because it shows us the difference. For example, in the list that I handed out this week before class, and if you didn't get it, please, if you have your email, I will send it out. You've got, for example, the first major argument in the Torah is the argument between Cain and Hevel, between Cain and Abel. What was their argument about?
An offering.
The argument was about an offering. If you take a look at the text, and we're going to look at this not today, we're going to look at this next week, and I'm going to turn you back to Bereshit, okay? I'm going to turn you back to Bereshit. Okay, it's page 7. It's page 7. It's page 7. Okay, if you take a look in verse 8, I'm going to start with that next week. I'd like you for next week to take a close look at chapter 4, Perek Dalet, page 7. In verse 8, you've got the line, Vayomer Cain el Hevel achiv. Cain said to his brother Abel, and if you take a look in the English, I love the way the English does this, because in the Torah you don't have 3 dots. But in English you've got 3 dots, and when they were in the field, Cain set upon his brother Abel and killed him. Vayehi b'hiyotam basadeh vayakam Cain et Hevel achiv vayahargehu. What did they argue about?
Doesn't say.
It doesn't say. It doesn't say. And I think that, of course, is a major point that it's making. Okay? There's a message here in the fact that it was ignored. We have to presume that the editors who put together Tanakh, put together the Torah specifically, weren't stupid. Presuming that they were edited. Otherwise we say this is God's message. But either way, there is a volume of information that you can get from this non-message. Okay? This is almost like you read into the white space between the black letters, and there's something here that's very significant to us. And we have to take a look at it and really understand what's going on. We're going to analyze that next week when we get to it. When we get down to, for example, the argument between Yaakov and Esav. Okay? What is that all about? Is it just about primogeniture, or is there something more to it? You've got 2 totally different characters here. There is a midrash that says, Halacha l'maaseh Esav soneh Yaakov. It is an accepted law. And this is the language that it uses in the midrash. Almost like it's a legal axiom that Esav hates Yaakov. Why did the Chachamim say it in that language? What do they get from the text that makes us come up with that conclusion? I can read the text completely the opposite.
Yeah,
I can read the text and say Esav is the victim, Yaakov is the aggressor.
of course.
Take a look, for example, at the positive aspect of Abraham's argument with God about Sodom. Okay? Abraham points to God and says, how can you possibly consider destroying an entire city like Sodom, despite the fact that they're not, that they are evil? But how can you destroy the city? Hashofet kol ha'aretz lo yaseh mishpat. Okay? Will the judge of all man not do justice? And he's couching this in the term of justice and not in the term of mercy. There's a very significant concept here. Then take a look at how Moshe argues with God to prevent him from killing the Bnei Israel after the Chet HaEgel? What is his argument? It boils down to 4 words. No, well, sorry. It boils down to 5 words. What's Moshe's argument to God after the Chet HaEgel? God says, I am so frustrated with these people, I am going to destroy them.
Enough.
And what's Moshe's argument to God?
What's that going to look like for Pharaoh?
Basically, yeah. What will the Goyim say?
Well, yeah. What will the world say? You brought them out and now you're
Yeah,
just
his
going to...
argument boils down to the same thing that my mom always used to tell me when I wanted to run out and play and make noise.
Yeah.
Which
What will
one?
the neighbors say?
Doesn't that sound familiar?
Yeah. But you know what really, really kills me about that?
It's true.
God accepts the argument.
Oh.
So your mom was right.
So my mom ultimately was right.